I didn't know that I was infamous.
Oh, Maurie, we got lots on you.
I would have thought that, I was, if anything, in my yearbook at Farmington High School, and understand that I went from being dirt poor, I think that's what we called it at the time, and spending 8 years in a one-room school. And I never knew any of the people when I first went to high school. They were all strangers to me because I'd been in the country, school for 8 years. So, and they'd all been together, so they were all very friendly with each other. And I dated one girl one time, and I was surprised that she accepted because she's the only one I ever asked. And then I discovered that since she said, well, you could ask me again, So I decided that Canton, Illinois, which was 5 times as big as Farmington, would probably have a lot more pretty girls who didn't know how poor I was, and, didn't know that I was bashful. But in the yearbook, it said the tall, bashful kind. That's my wife to this day does not believe that there was ever a time that I was bashful with anything, but I was a very bashful guy. At any rate, I moved I worked for my father for a year, and he had one rule, and that is if you were related to him, he didn't pay you anything. So I went to work for my uncles in the sawmill business, which I hated. I'd grown up in the sawmill business, and I did not like it. We never were able to make very much money at it, and my dad finally figured that out because he was pretty much of a genius and an engineer, and he quit running sawmills and started making sawmill equipment. And you can look up sawmill hydraulics in any internet, and they have equipment sold basically all over the world. It's all made in Illinois, but my 2 nephews now run the business. My 2 younger brothers did, and then their children run it, and it's amazing what they can do. They can actually build a sawmill that when the log comes up, 30 seconds later, it's lumber. And I'm not exaggerating, 30 seconds later, it's lumber. And it used to take us half a day to do that kind of stuff. Anyway, got out of that and went to Zanesville, Ohio, because as I said, I did not like the lumber business, but I was driving the truck, and Manny kids me because when people ask you what you did, you simply said, I drove truck. You didn't say I drove a truck or a semi or whatever. You just said I drove truck, and then everybody knew what you did. So at night, I went to broadcasting school, and when I graduated from that, I got a notification from a guy who had been a graduate of the school and was in Zanesville, Ohio, and he sent out a notice to all the graduates. And so I took a train and a bus and a rental car and everything in the middle of winter to get to Zanesville, Ohio, from where I was, which Pat knows was on the Mississippi River at the time in Savannah, Illinois, 400 miles. And they asked me if I wanted to, when I met the CEO, if I wanted to be afternoon disc jockey on radio, because they owned both stations, or if I wanted to be take a chance. I'd do all the deliveries on television and take a chance that I would become a television director. And I simply said to the guy, I am a television director. That's who I am. Because I discovered in school that was just meant for me. And for years, I thought that meant, and I finally went to Channel 10 when I came to Arizona because they were the fastest growing market. And them or Tucson. And fortunately, I landed in Phoenix. And it took me a year and a half. I called every station. I went to see every station. Nobody had any openings. And I called at Channel 12 so many times that he finally said, Maurie, don't ever call me again. You call me every week, and we don't have many openings. Call the other stations. There's a lesson to be learned about maybe 20 years later, I was looking for a job. And he made the mistake of calling Channel 10, where he heard me say, Woody, we don't have very many openings, so call the other stations. I don't know where he ended up, but I will share that. You can edit out his name there. WH is good enough. But anyway, that's what happens. What goes around comes around, and we all know that, and we just need every once in a while to remember things like that. You know that nobody's too big, and nothing is too small to overlook. You know. Now, being a television director, I had the idea that I was the person in charge. I got a call one time from Stephen Shaddig, who was the writer and the promoter, the manager of Barry Goldwater's involvement in running for public office. And he said Barry Goldwater had been was senator at the time, and was running for re-election as senator after he had, well, this was before he lost the attempt to become president. But he was doing commercials as he was running for re-election. And Steve said, would you be interested in coming out to his house and filming his commercial? I said, absolutely. Love to. So went to his house. I think Manny was my cameraman, and we did it on film. And I had gotten the script from Steve and put it on a teleprompter, set it all up on the patio. So when the senator was ready, we were ready. And he came out and he looked at the prompter and read through it, and he said, okay, I'm ready. So I said, okay. So we put the mic on, and this was when commercials were 60 seconds in length. And he read it straight through perfectly. And I said, Senator, that was great. What I want to do is move the camera, change the angle a little bit so I can edit it. And he said, now, I'm 80 some years old, but he said, this was a few years ago, he said, come here, son. And I walked up to him and he said, I know you're good at what you do. I know you love what you do. Steve's told me all about you. And he said, that's great. However, I want you to know I do these things one time. And being the person in charge, I said, yes, sir. Now, the story continues a little bit. Barry insisted whenever they had a thing set up in the Senate where they could videotape something and send it back. He insisted on coming back here because I was his director, and he wouldn't do anything unless I was on television. And so for years I was his director. And then when he got reelected to the Senate after he lost to Johnson, Johnson did a 23-minute address to the nation. And so the networks got together and said, this was in the day when you had to give equal time to anybody. So the Republicans got equal time, 23 minutes and 30 seconds to be exact. And so they asked for Barry Goldwater. And Barry said, yeah, but I'll do it in Phoenix. And so I got a call from Steve Shattuck, and he said, any place good enough for Barry to be? And I said, you know, I know he's a Democrat, but Tom Chauncey, I think, is a good friend of Barry Goldwater. So I went into his office and said, can we borrow your office for Barry Goldwater? He said, sure, no problem. Let me know when he's going to be here. So when Barry showed up, we had the script done on teleprompter. And then CBS decided that they would send a producer to make sure that it was quality. Not these hicks in Arizona, but from New York City. So he came out. He's a very nice guy. And so we set up everything and had the camera in the office and everything. And it was connected to the control room. So I had 2 tape machines set up to record it. And I was going to direct it, and the producer was going to produce. There was nothing for him to do. And so I said, he said, well, where's the script? And I said, here, you can have my script. I'm not going to pay attention to the script. I'm going to watch Barry, you know. And so we get rolling and recording and everything. Barry's fine, and it's a good-looking set. And Chauncey's office was fantastic. It's getting to be about 18, 19 minutes, and the producer said, my God, he's running out of script. He's running out of script. What are we going to do? And I said, well, we do what we call giving him time, and we'll show him he's got 3 minutes left and 2 minutes left, 1. And when we give him a line, he'll wrap it up. And he said, well, what's he going to say? I said, I don't know, but he'll just ad-lib for the last 3 minutes, which is exactly what he did, you know. Came to the end of the script, and he just talked, and he was wonderful. So we stopped recording, and I called the videotape room and said, check the tapes and make sure it's okay. So they did, and the producer said, great, we'll keep that. And I said, yeah, that's a good idea, because he won't do it again. And he said, well, this goes on all 3 networks, all 4 networks, actually. So he said, he'll do it again. And I said, no, he won't. I didn't tell you this, but he won't. And he said, well, for national TV, not a problem. He said, we'll go down and talk to him. I said, good luck with that, you know. So we walk all the way down to Chauncey's office, and Barry's got the microphone off, and he's thanking the crew, and he walked in, and he said, thank you, Maurie, and he looks at the guy, and he says, say hello to Walter, and he's out the door and in the car, and the guy's just standing there. And I said, and I couldn't resist. I said, you thought you were in charge, didn't you? It was just beautiful, just perfect timing, you know. The guy said, wow, maybe we voted for the wrong guy. I said, yeah, he's the man in charge. You know, whenever it was Barry doing anything, he was the man in charge. But being a television director for over 50 years is the only thing better than going to Channel 10 every day for 25 years was walking across the dining room into my office and working for me for 27 years. And I thought, and when I left Channel 10, because I just could not get along with the person that they had hired, you know, as general manager. But I learned more in a couple years with the guys who bought Channel 10 from Chauncey than I did in the previous 20 years. I mean, they were, you know, they were with it, they were right now, and they were terrific guys. And I hated leaving there because my friendships and my life was at Channel 10. And that was my name, you know. When people introduced me, this is Maurie Helles, production manager at Channel 10. So without production manager at Channel 10, I didn't have a last name, you know. So at any rate, I thought maybe I could make a living in Phoenix, you know. And I had some wonderful clients that I'd done production for who were totally loyal and totally capable, and I expanded, you know, my ability to direct all kinds of. But the secret to directing in Phoenix was you wear more than one hat. And you all know that. You've been in this business long enough to know that if you wait for somebody to hand you a script, then it's not going to happen. They're going to give you a page of blank paper, you know, with a pen, and if you come up with the writing and you come up with the idea and you come up with a script, you have a lot better chance of becoming a director than if you don't. And I tell kids that all the time, you know, they need to expand their writing ability because that's what makes the wheel go round. And so, long story, even longer than what I've admitted here, is that for the entire career, I was in 30 states and 5 countries, on location in 30 states and 5 countries. The first director to ever direct a college World Series baseball game. They didn't have a clue how to set it up or anything, so we took our equipment, and it was fun. I didn't realize till like 10 years later that I was the first guy to ever do that. But I got to tell you that I could not have imagined what a ride that was going to be when I left Savannah, Illinois for Zanesville, Ohio. And I am so thankful to so many people. I've met so many wonderful people, a lot of whom are here today. Celebrities like Pat McMahon. There is no like Pat McMahon. There is only Pat McMahon. And I have called him friend for many, many years. When he was at 5 and I was at 10, we were still friends. And I watched him on his first show in Davenport, Iowa, you know, when he was I was on television in Davenport before he was, because I thought I could sing at that time, and I wanted to perform. My teacher told me that in 8th grade. I said, "Why did you choose me to do the lead in this play?" And she said, "Because you're a performer." And I said, "I'm not a performer." She said, "You are, you just don't know it, you know." But I think all television directors and all directors of media are performers to some extent. You have to be, you gotta be able to love what you do. That's the secret. You have to love what you do. And I had over 50 years of that, and I'm a very thankful person as a result. Thank you all for listening.
Any questions for Maurie? This is open. Maurie, were you, did you do anything when the Pope was here?
Yes, I was in charge, and that was Bill Miller's idea. He and I had worked together for a long time, and he said they got into a meeting with the managers, and he said, they said, "How can we do all of those locations that the Pope's going to be?" And Bill said, "If we hire Maurie Helles to be in charge of all the production, we'll be able to make a videotape and sell it to people and cover the cost of production." That's exactly what happened. I did a 90-minute show, and I asked Tom Chauncey how important it was, and he said, "You just better make sure that it runs at least 90 minutes. We don't want to we don't want to cheat anybody." But he said, So anyway, I did it, and it was really amazing, to be able to do it. Like 2 years later, I was in Italy with Wendy, and I had just done a half-hour special for Food for the Hungry in Africa. And so I met Wendy. We were a couple then, and I met her in Italy, and we spent the next week in Italy. And in Rome, we went to looking for where everything was in Rome, in the Vatican. It's amazing, the artwork. It's amazing. Just walking down the halls was amazing. And I heard this voice. We walked in, and I heard this voice. And I said, God, that's the Pope. And Wendy said, that's not the Pope, it's a loudspeaker. I said, Wendy, I just spent, the last half a year of my life listening to the Pope doing this video. That's the Pope. Now, this is a true story. We walked through the lobby listening to the Pope, get to where there's an aisle down one side of this room. And honestly, there's a guy standing at the door halfway down the aisle, and a guard, and he opens the door and turns to us and motions, come in. We walk all the way down the aisle, walk in, and he motions us inside. There's two empty chairs. There's two empty chairs in front of us. And there's room full of people from all over the world. They're talking and they ask the Pope questions, and they're from every country in Europe and probably the world. And groups of them, Indians here and Mexicans here, people from the United States. And we sat there in those two empty chairs. And there's the Pope sitting,
Wow.
And they do that outside now, but because they can't get that many people, there's
Can
too
you
many
get
people.
Francis to be on our Christmas show?
And he can.
But I mean, it was wonderful because it just couldn't have been any better. And Wendy said, it doesn't get any better than this, Well, I'll tell you, with 30 years of Wendy, it hasn't gotten any worse either.
How'd you meet?
Yeah. How did we meet? She was at Channel 10, and she was married at the time. I did production at Channel 10, even though I was freelance, and I would walk. Her boss was the accountant, I guess, and I would go to see her because she'd been a friend of mine. And I walked past Wendy's office, and so kind of got to know her, and I kept saying, well, let's do lunch sometime. So I met her one day in the hall, and I said, let's do lunch. And she said, she took me by the arm, and she stopped me, and she said, and when?
Oh.
I said, oh, how about tomorrow? By that time she had been divorced, and I had lost my wife. So we were both single, so we went to lunch the next day.
Were you at Channel 10 during the Bill Close, Mary Jo West news
Yes,
days?
I was.
Tell
I
us
was
about
at home
those.
and had to go back down, and had a tough time getting into the control room because there was a lot of cops around. Only Joe Billy Gwynn did not know that.
Oh. But were the Mary Jo West Bill Close days as dramatic as we've heard?
Probably not, because Mary Jo was just, and I was, most people don't know this, Mary Jo didn't know it for 10 years, that I was basically responsible for her coming to Channel 10. I went to Mr. Martin, Bob Martin, the genius that he was, went to Bill Close and said, we're going to have a co-anchor for you. And we had moved him to 10 o'clock at night, which he wasn't happy about. He had the 6 and 10. And Bob said, it's gonna be a woman. You know, well, that he really went bonkers over that. I don't need to come that woman in here. You know, I can handle this job myself. Anyway, and Bob said, the point is simply, there is going to be a woman co-anchor. So we interviewed women all the time for like, I don't know, several weeks. And Mary Jo came in and did a half-hour political, something, I can't remember her last name. The lady was running for not for Senate, but for Republican or Democrat to be elected to national. And Mary Jo was brought in to do, there was a room full of people, audience, and Mary Jo she handled the whole thing. She did was the hostess for it. And I directed it, and I said, she's really good. You know, this young girl from ASU is really good. So I went to Mr. Close and said, Mary Jo West just did this thing, and I think she'd be really good. And he said, I know who she is. I've seen her, and I'm not impressed. So later in the day, I met Bill Miller, who was now the manager of news, and I said, there's Mary Jo West out of Channel 8, and she's better than anybody we've had so far. We ought to bring her in for an interview. He said, well, let's bring her in for an interview. I mean, Bill always loved to say yes. You know, he didn't like saying no. So we brought her in for an interview, and Bill agreed that he would, sit in with the interview, and they would do 5 minutes of news. And when they finished the video, the door opened, and Homer Lane walked in and said, Mr. Chauncey wants to see you in his office. And she signed the contract before she got out of there. And he had seen her through his closed circuit, and that's how she got at Channel 10. But she didn't know I had anything to do with that. She finally did figure. I told her, that's how it happened.
But Bill continued to be unhappy for a while.
Oh yeah, he was not. She worked her buns off, and he finally kind of got around to accepting her. But it was. He was not very. He wasn't very nice to any women. If you want to know the truth. When I did an interview with him over radio spots that we did for saving, not throwing away everything in the world, I asked Bill Close if I could come and interview him, about how we should recycle stuff. And he said, I'll come to you. The guy doesn't have any legs, so I didn't know that he was a good driver, but I guess he was, because he came to my house. He was a different person than I had worked with for over 50 years and known for over 50 years, because he came to Channel 10 right after I did. But he was just a different person. He wasn't the cantankerous, person that he was before. He was just humble, and he was nice, and he was nice to Wendy. First time I'd ever seen him nice to a girl, to a woman, But he was delightful, And he did a great interview, and we made a really good spot. That wasn't the real Bill Close that I'd known for so many years, But he turned into a nice guy.
Except for Mary Jo. We had her as a speaker last year. Mary, you were there at our university meeting.
Yeah.
She still talks about that. She decided to grin and bear it and learn from him. That was how she coped.
Yeah.
She could have left. And give her a lot of credit.
Well, everybody that worked with Bill, you got to hand it to the guy. He made you better. He made you better. I directed his 6 o'clock news, and I will tell you that he made me better than as a director, because he opened the door one time after the 6 o'clock news, true story. Opened the door and he said, what the hell is that 1 second of black? And I said, close the door before I do something drastic. And he closed the door. And I mean, how do you account for a second of black, you know? Because the guy who was supposed to do it, it wasn't as long as he said it was. I said, what was that? You know? So when it went to black, I went back to black. But I mean, that was typical close. He would find any little thing wrong that he could, and if he thought that would make you better, then he would let you know about it. But you got to hand it to a guy who's strapped on his legs every day to come to work. And I admired him for that, because, you know, I'm not sure I would have been that courageous a person.
Maurie, you said you went to broadcasting school. Was that kind of an alternative?
Yeah, there was no broadcasting schools in any university in the country, or high school, or anything else. They were not prepared for it. This company in Chicago was totally prepared, had written everything they could find about television production, you know, and television, everything that was available, and as any kind of a job in TV. I really did, for a couple months, went around and picked up. You have to remember, there was no videotape. This was live. This was 1959. This was live. And so I went around and picked up all of the props. You know, Wednesdays was going to be Kroger night, so I had to go grocery shopping, you know. And so you went in there and got all the props that you would need for all the commercials that were according to the log, according to the traffic department. You know. That was my job. But I got a chance to direct, and it was so bad that it's amazing they didn't fire me on the spot. Did any of you ever hear of Casey Jones, a half-hour show, a syndicated show? We had that, and it was sponsored by Casey Jones Potato Chips. You know, and we had a little music thing, and as a director, I was in charge of all the audio, which meant queuing up the ET at the end of the commercial, you know, and which was the 33 and the third that I ran at 60 RPM. You know, I forgot to change the speed on it, so and this was live, of course. And I thought, oh God, I got to call the program director. So I did, and he said, well, we knew it was coming because you queued it up on the air. I showed it to the wrong way, so I thought, man, is there anything else I could have done here, you know? So, but he was very understanding. Yeah, you've done that a million times, yeah, great. Yeah, I almost forgot about that. I thought, you know.
I got one more question, and it has to be from another of the pioneers, which is Latin for geezer. You've been in the business for so long, and you've seen miraculous growth, hundreds of channels, satellites,
Right.
things like push a button and all of a sudden you're Hong Kong live. And was there anything that you remember that you think was better in 1959, 1960, 61, about being in the business?
That's a great question, Pat, because there were a lot of things that were better. You know, there were a lot of things that were better than there is now. You couldn't say, we did documentaries on various things, and one of them was unwed mothers. You couldn't say they were pregnant.
You couldn't.
That was, you had to say with child.
Yeah.
I mean, it was that kind, that's a stretch of the imagination, but really, that's
No,
how
that's
tight it was. I mean, no, everybody knew you didn't say anything around an open mic that you didn't want to go on because it wasn't always open. I mean, it wasn't always closed, you know, so if the mic was closed and the camera was open, and the very first day that I was there, I was walking through the station with the production manager, and he said, well, at least you got experience. I said, I don't know how to run a camera, you know. He said, well, you got experience in the business, and you know how to not walk in front of the camera. As we walked in front of the camera, you know, I said, yeah, I think we just blew that one out the water. You know? But, you know, when he asked me what I wanted to do, I said, I want your job, and I got it eventually.
Would you like the relaxed atmosphere then? Is that what you like better?
No, I didn't mind the structure that we had to adhere to because it just seemed right. We're going into people's homes, and, you know, we felt like we're intruding in people's homes, really. And if you didn't have something worthwhile and that they would be happy with and proud of, you defend them, you know, in their own home. And so that's kind of the lessons that we learned back then that to which people do not adhere at all today, you know. But I think it was a better atmosphere in which to treat people and be friends with people. And the thing I miss the most is like the survivors. You'd have a party at Channel 5 and for the circus. The circus would come to town and we'd have a party and everybody would be there. And you get to see everybody from every station and you became friends with all those people. They don't have that anymore, you know. I don't know why not, but the only thing that where people get together really is like the Walter Cronkite thing.
And funerals.
I would hate to see them go to the, you know, the Wally's deal, you know, the civil deal, because for that, the Hall of Fame thing, it's important that I think all those people get together and we get to see Pat, you know, as an MC, and we wouldn't get to do that with it all being
Virtually.
the
What
way
about
it
the
is, the
premiere
way it has
parties we
been.
used to have on Channel 10 and 5? You alone on Channel 10. How many premiere parties, television parties they
Oh yeah,
used to
every
give?
fall we had
Oh my
great,
gosh.
we had great parties. We had great parties. Then that made the other channels do the
Yes.
same thing. You know? But it was things like, you know, I called a lady I knew in the business and said, I'd like to go to Channel 12's fall party. She said, okay, take me and you can go. And so I did. I mean, and nobody said, you can't come in here because you're Channel 10. I mean, they said, yay, nice to see you, Maurie. You know, I mean, that's the way people were then, you know.
Going after the same buck. Now,
Mm,
Right.
yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Maurie, you had a legendary, really, you worked for a legendary station, a legendary person,
Well,
and you came out being a legend. And I know I took you to lunch right after you left,
yeah,
and you were down on
Yeah.
yourself
yeah. Well,
and said, I don't have an affiliation anymore. I said, Maurie, you are the star. You are. I mean, I try to pump him up because
she was.
I
yeah.
knew that everybody knew you.
She said, you won't have any trouble making a living.
No.
And Frank Sprague told me, he said, I said, I don't know if I can make a living. He said, Maurie, you will make at least twice as much for yourself as you did at Channel 10. Now, he was wrong. It was more like 3 times as
There
much.
we go.
I realized that, you know, when I left it, I got $50,000 when I left. And I thought, I don't believe I can live the rest of my life on $50,000, which is basically one month or 1 year's pay. And so I decided I better start saving some of what I make, regardless of what it is. And people say, you can't do that. You can. In bad years, 15% wasn't a lot, but in good years, 15% was considerable. And you could add to that on a good year, so yeah. So I don't have to worry about being retired.
He's writing it all down. He's writing the figures because he moonlights for
They
the guy.
forced me into retirement,
Financial advisor.
Otherwise, I would have been like Pat McMahon and who's that other guy that's for the Suns? Al McCoy.
Oh,
Al McCoy said, I said, Chick Hearn is crippled and he's looking really bad. And Al said, that's not going to happen to me. I'm going to quit early, long before I'm as old as what Chick is. He's about 5 years older than Chick ever made it, maybe 10. And he still sounds exactly the same.
One of the best that ever has been.
He's absolutely
definitely.
the number one. It should be the number one guy in sportscasting, and he is.
He is, absolutely.
And now the Suns finally have got a team.
Yes, they do.
Al was one of the first people on or off the air that I ever met in the business here. And I was walking through the halls, Channel 12, having left my resume at somebody's desk. And Al introduced himself. You know how friendly he is. And he was this little unknown somebody that comes in looking like I'm 12 years old and introduced himself, Chad, Des Moines, Iowa. I said, yeah. I said, I went to high school there. He says, well, I was at Drake University. And we began to chat. And damned if we didn't find out through just exchanges of dialogue that he was the piano player in the band that played for my prom.
Oh.
He
Oh, we're all-
worked his way. Al McCoy worked his way through Drake University as a jazz pianist. You probably have heard him when we did the Christmas show.
Yeah.
Fabulous. It was just an incredible entertainer. But he was a piano player for one of the big bands in Des Moines, Iowa, and we started exchanging dates. I said, my God, that was my prom.
Thanks so
Thank you, Maurie. Thank you very much.
Great.
Fun being a performer.